believe I mentioned yesterday how sad it is that the New York Islanders franchise has fallen so far. Today I'm wearing a different Islanders jersey, the one I like better than the other one. A little further away from the classic stripes, but I like it. I know I was one of the few, apparently, because they didn't keep it very long. Anyhow, while my marker drops on the floor, because that's kind of my thing. That's Diet Coke from McDonald's, so it kind of tastes like water, but that's what you expect. Alright, let's turn this off. So I can discuss this like a gentleman, without yelling. New York Islanders, 1982. This was their third straight Stanley Cup. And as a Canucks fan, it hurt me because they beat the Canucks in the final. Famously, after, I believe it was Game 1, when the Islanders won it in overtime, Richard Brodeur decided to take a swing at the camera on the way out. Which kind of spoke for all Canuck fans, I think. Because there had been a feeling of, this is great, this isn't going to end, the Cinderella story is going to continue, and then the Islanders slammed that door shut. Overtime in Game 1 is as close as they would get. The Islanders didn't look back from that Game 1, and of course, if the Canucks had somehow stolen Game 1 on the island, they still would have lost the series, but I think there would have been a lot more respect going forward, at least until October, when they started playing hockey again and they started losing. I think of all of the Stanley Cup finalists, in terms of luck getting there and kind of an iffy record, the Canucks are up there with the Minnesota North Stars of 91. We'll get to them when we get to 1991. But this is night 2 of the Islanders. So let's take a look. There wasn't a whole lot of change. Thomas Johnsson came in. The New York Islanders had the same sort of mystique then that the Red Wings would have 20 years later. That all these rookies would come in and you'd be like, oh, well, things are going to change. They can't stay this good. And then they do. This team put up 118 points, and that's before loser points. That's when there was ties. There was no overtime games. So 118 points is, equivalent of probably 129, 130 with today's game. So the only changes really, I think I spelled McEwen wrong. Let me go double check. I may or may not be right on that one. Yeah, I spelled that wrong. Let me go ahead and fix that. Mike McEwen, it wasn't the year before that he got traded. It was after this one that he went to Colorado, and he became expendable because they had guys like Johnsson coming up. It was a pretty impressive roster. So Johnsson gets added in place of, I believe it was Jean Potvin. He replaced, or Jean Potvin. Brent Sutter came in, and Brent Sutter played really well. So while Wayne Merrick was kind of scaled back, and Anders Kaller endured some injuries and dropped to 18 goals from 36 the year before, and he was on his way out of the league at that point. Really, Brent Sutter and Dwayne Sutter, that was a big story going into that season's playoffs. When you look at the scoring, Mike Bossy 147. So we are into live puck era now. We are into the big totals. So Mike Bossy, and you look at only 4 hat tricks that year for Bossy. So this was just consistent goal scoring. It's 64 goals that year. Trottier had 4 as well. Potvin had 1, and Brent Sutter had the other one. Trottier had 129 points. Again, this is live puck era at its apex. Tonelli 93 points, which I mentioned last night. Tonelli was a contributor. Gillies 77. So live puck or dead puck, he didn't care. He was going to score around the same amount of points. Denny Potvin 61 points. He was injured for points of that year, which is why his points totals are up. Bob Bourne 53 points, and then Dwayne Sutter also had 53 points. The only separator being Bourne had more goals than Sutter. Penalty minutes. Dwayne Sutter 100, Bob Nystrom 103, Brent Sutter 114. The Sutter boys were tough. And they were more youthful than some of the other guys in the lineup, and it helped. It helped greatly to have that kind of mix on the roster. Person with 98 penalty minutes, or 99 penalty minutes. Gord Lane with 98 penalty minutes in only 51 games. Bryan Trottier had 88 penalty minutes that year. So you couldn't really mess with any of the team. None of them. Stefan Persson with 99 penalty minutes. You know, you always hear about the gentle Swede. Oh, he's, a sweetheart out there and he doesn't hit. Nobody said that was Stefan Persson. I don't think. I really can't see it. Very underrated, as I said last night, very underrated for the Islanders, and I was a big fan of his. The Islanders' path to the Stanley Cup was almost as easy. It took them 19 games. They had a scare in the first round. They went to the full 5 games with Pittsburgh. Second round, the Rangers, they beat them 4 games to 2. And then they beat the Nordiques in 4. And then they beat the Canucks in 4. So they lost they won at least their last 9 games in the playoffs in a row. I would imagine partly because they were tired. Let's hurry up, get this over with, because we're tired. This was their 3rd straight Stanley Cup. And the important thing here to notice is there really wasn't a lot of turnover. So these guys all knew how to win together. If I had watched hockey in 80 and if we started in 1980, a lot of these guys would be from 80 right through 83. In the playoffs, Bryan Trottier was the number 1 scorer with 29 points. Bossy was number 2 with 27, but he had 17 goals. Pretty sure that was a record. And he had the Conn Smythe that year. And I really don't think it was close. Denny Potvin, 21. Bob Bourne, 16. John Tonelli, 16. Persson, 15. Gillies, 14. Butch Goring's role offensively dropped with the team. Butch Goring, though, a really, really solid player who was, of course, the first ever deadline deal that made a difference and got a team to a Stanley Cup. Was that Butch Goring deal in 1980. And they were still reaping the benefits in 82. I remember the Stanley Cup final looking like David versus Goliath. And the scores are 6-5 in overtime, 6-4 in game 2, and then games 3 and 4 was 3-0 and 3-1. The Islanders just shut everything down on the road, and there was no doubt when they came to Vancouver that it was over. This was really the ultimate David and Goliath. I can't think of a greater one, and I know Minnesota-Pittsburgh is going to be close from 1991, and there's others that are close, but for me, just the difference in talent. I mean, you look at that Canuck team from 82, and while I love the guys to death, none of them are Hall of Famers. So the fact there were 5 again, and it's Gillies, Bossy, Potvin, Smith, and Trottier, and those 5 Hall of Famers all working together, and you've got the Sutter boys and Tonelli. I mean, just the scoring depth alone is scary. This team had no weakness. There really wasn't one. That's why they cruised through the playoffs in 19 games. 20 by today's standards, because again, it takes 4 games to win in the first round now, and it took 3 games to win in the first round back then. They went to a best of 7 set instead of best of 5 because they felt that would eliminate upsets to some extent. It was thought that winning a best of 5 series was easier than a best of 7. So to give the home team more of an advantage with home ice, make it 4 out of 7. Eventually, someday I'll sit down and do a video on whether or not that actually made a difference. But for now, we'll leave it as it is. Islanders 1982, one of the most impressive teams I've ever watched. And again, part of the reason that I'm doing this series is because of the fact that I've seen people that say that when I talk about the Islanders being one of the greatest teams going, Islanders? Yeah, right. They won 4 in a row. This is 3. And the team that won that 4th is very commonly viewed as the best team they put on the ice. And the team in 84 wasn't far off. I think the team in 84 just ran out of steam. They'd won 4 in a row, and then they ran into the Oilers in the final in 84, and we'll get into that when I get up to 84. For now, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you again soon.